So, you've got this nagging shoulder pain. It's been going on for weeks, maybe even months. You finally go see a doctor, they send you for an MRI, and then that report hits your inbox. You know that feeling, right? Your heart starts beating a little faster as you open it up and start to read.
And as you're scanning the page, these words just leap out at you. Words like tear, degeneration, tendinopathy. Man, it sounds so official. It sounds like something is seriously broken. And honestly, it's pretty terrifying. Your mind just starts spinning, right? Oh my gosh, do I need surgery? Am I ever going to be able to play with my kids or lift groceries normally again?
It feels like you've just been handed a final verdict on your shoulder. But hang on, what if I told you those scary-sounding words, while they might be technically accurate, don't actually describe a disease or an injury? What if, for most of us, they're just describing the normal, everyday process of aging?
All right, let's really dig into this. We're going to start by talking about why that word abnormal on your report might actually be, well, the new normal. Then we'll get into the pretty shocking disconnect between what an MRI shows and what a person actually feels. From there, we'll look at the huge problem of overtreatment this whole thing causes, and then we'll wrap up by mapping out a much more sensible way forward.
Okay, so let's start with a kind of a radical idea. What if all those so-called abnormalities on your MRI are in fact completely and totally normal? To understand this, we're going to look at a huge, groundbreaking study out of Finland called the FMI study. It really changes everything. So here's what the researchers did. They took a big group of regular adults, over 600 of them, and they gave every single person a high-powered MRI. Now here's the really important part. They scanned everyone, whether their shoulder hurt or not. The whole point was to figure out what a normal shoulder actually looks like as we get older.
And the results? Whoa, they are a bombshell. 99%. Let that sink in for a second. Practically every single person in this study had at least one thing on their MRI that would be called an abnormality. It turns out, if you're over 40, having a perfect MRI is actually the weird thing.
But wait, it gets even crazier. This is the real kicker. They look specifically at the people who had zero pain. We're talking people who felt perfectly fine, no issues at all. And even in that completely pain-free group, 96% of their shoulders showed degenerative changes on the MRI. Think about that. The very things that make you panic when you read your report were found in almost everyone who felt great.
You see, for most people, this isn't really about an injury, it's just about aging. The best way to think about it is like getting wrinkles or gray hair, but on the inside. And the data here makes it so clear. You look at full-thickness tears, the scariest sounding kind. They were found in 0% of adults under 45, but they showed up in almost 30% of people over 70. It's just a part of time passing.
So, this all leads to a massive question, right? If basically everyone has these things on their MRI, how can they possibly be the direct cause of your pain? And that brings us to our next point, the huge, and I mean huge, disconnect between the picture and the pain. Just look at the data from the image study. It's pretty amazing. For tendinopathy, which is basically just a fancy word for tendon irritation, get this. It was actually found slightly more often in the shoulders of people with no pain. And for partial tears, the numbers are almost identical, whether you have pain or not. It just goes to show the image is a terrible predictor of what you're actually feeling.
I know what you're thinking. Okay, fine. But what about the really bad ones, the full-thickness tears? And yeah, at first glance, it looked like they were more common in people with pain. But, and this is a big but, once the scientists adjusted for age, that difference completely disappeared. In fact, here's a mind-blowing stat for you. A staggering 78% of all the full-thickness tears they found were in people who had absolutely no symptoms at all.
So if these findings are basically normal parts of aging and they don't really line up with pain, then what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is that our medical system often ends up treating the picture, not the person. And this leads to a massive, expensive, and often painful problem, overtreatment. And the numbers back this up big time. As it's gotten easier and cheaper to get an MRI, we find more and more of these normal age-related changes. And what happens? We see a direct, consistent, and rising number of rotator cuff surgeries. We find something on a scan, so we feel like we have to fix it. It's a classic case of treating the scan, not the patient.
And hey, you don't have to take my word for it. The doctors who wrote a commentary on this very study, they summed it up perfectly. They said that these changes you see on an MRI are much more likely to just be those age-related changes, wrinkles on the inside, than they are to be some kind of major structural problem that needs a surgeon to go in and fix it. So if the answer isn't to rush out and get an MRI and then freak out about the results, what is the answer? Let's talk about a more logical, more evidence-based approach that puts you, the actual person, back in the driver's seat, not your scan.
The science really points to what you could call a watch-and-wait philosophy. So, first up, for about 6 to 8 weeks, you just focus on conservative stuff, resting it, changing the activities that make it hurt, maybe some simple pain meds. Then, you start rehabilitation, usually with a physical therapist, to get your strength and function back. And only then, only if you're not seeing any real improvement after a couple of months, should an MRI even be part of the conversation.
This completely changes how we should think about an MRI. You see, it's not some magic machine that tells you what's wrong. A good diagnosis comes from a doctor actually examining you and listening to your story. An MRI is a tool to confirm a diagnosis that's already been made and to help a surgeon plan for a surgery they already know is needed. It's a roadmap for surgery, not a fortune teller for pain. And that really brings us to the most important point of all of this, the bottom line. Your care should never be dictated by a picture. It should be guided by you, by your personal story, by a good physical exam, and most importantly, by your functional limitations. What can you do? What can't you do? That's what matters. The whole goal is to treat the person, not the scan. So I want to leave you with one final thought to chew on. Words have incredible power, right? What if we just stopped using these scary, disease-sounding words like degeneration, and instead we started calling these findings what they so often are, normal aging? Just imagine how much fear, anxiety, and unnecessary surgery we could avoid. It's a simple question that could totally change how we think about pain and about our own bodies as they move through life.